Hello, I'm Adam Corrigan Holowitz, and this is To You With Love from Down the Street, a half hour of music and stories that is part of Celebrating Our Communities, presented by the London Heritage Council. I thought I would share some stories today about community from my childhood neighborhood of Manor Park. Manor Park is on the west side of Wharncliffe Road, and if you were driving along Wharncliffe, it would take you less than 5 minutes to drive completely past Manor Park. You would probably not realize you had drove past this small neighborhood of little houses that were built mostly after the Second World War. If you were to turn off Wharncliffe Road and drive through Manor Park, you would notice the local church, a few car mechanic shops, and the school. You would also see all sorts of houses. Each were built by the original owners many years ago. You won't see two houses alike. Each builder had their own unique method of construction. This is what you would see if you were to drive around Manor Park, but to actually know this neighborhood, you would have to get out of your car. The neighborhood lives in garage sales and socials, backyard gatherings and meetings on street corners. With Wharncliffe Road running along one side of Manor Park, the rest of the neighborhood is bordered by two different natural worlds. There is the coves, a deep ravine of trees and a body of water that used to be part of the main river, but got cut off over time. Now it sits in stillness and spends away time, and the people who live in Manor Park spend away time with it. Across the water is a trailer park, and on summer evenings you can sometimes hear music drift over the water from it. More often than not, something by Elvis. There was a paint factory in the coves for a long time, and for a long time now it has been closed. The lead paint polluted the water, so no one swims in the coves. And yet the trees grow tall, and the resilience of nature is slowly overwhelming past degradations. Bordering the south side of the neighborhood is Euston Park, a big grassy hill which is slowly sinking over time. The hill is sinking because Euston Park was a garbage dump for a long time, and for many years now the grass and flowers have reclaimed this patch of land. So, here sits Manor Park and all who live in it, held in gently by an urban highway, an old river, and a slowly flattening hill. It is a place where people live, every life and situation unique. There are hard times and there are good times. And just as it is all across our city and all across the world for that matter, people find a way to fortify each other, sometimes in celebration and sometimes in solace, making their presence known to each other so that it's clear that they are carrying on together. That was our friend, London musical great Denise Pelley, who is joining us to sing some songs today. Stephen Holowitz is at the piano, and they just performed The River is Waiting. There are many passions that can capture the hearts and minds of people. For Bernie at the moment, it is eggs. Bernie grew up in Manor Park, and when he was a boy, Manor Park was still part of Westminster Township, yet to be amalgamated into the city. Perhaps this is why Bernie has always felt the pull of the country. Maybe it is a desire to live outside of the city limits. So when Bernie retired, he bought a farm and moved out to the country. He started out by raising and showing horses, Hoflingers, a hardy horse from the Austrian mountains. Horses were Bernie's first passion on the farm, but then he got into tropical birds, which somehow led to raising heritage breed chickens. And with chickens comes eggs. Beautiful, big, free-range eggs, the kind that are almost too big for the carton. Bernie sells some of the eggs, but a lot of the eggs go to different places without any financial transaction. He delivers some to the food bank in Manor Park, and some to the people who can't get out to the store, and some to people whom Bernie simply wants to share eggs with. If you ask Bernie how he is making money on the operation, he will be quick to correct you. "I'm not in the egg business. I'm a man of eggs," he will say with a laugh. Eggs are Bernie's passion at the moment, and I think it's human nature that we find a way to make our passions help the people around us. The result is small acts which are routine, and yet over time they make a difference. This also reminds me of Joe Bowman. Joe was indisputably the unofficial mayor of Manor Park. He was a veteran of the Second World War, where he served as a medic. After the war, he came to live in Manor Park. He had worked in a general store before the war, so he got into the grocery trade, opening his store here in Manor Park. He lived above the shop at first, started a family, and saved up, and then moved to a house nearby where he lived for over half a century until he passed away in 2013. Though it has been closed for a long time now, for a lot of people in the neighborhood, the southwest corner of Emery and Warncliffe Road will forever be home to Bowman's Grocery. Joe's store was more than a business for this community. Why? Well, because Joe ran it as more than a business. He offered the dignity of credit for the people who lived here when times were tight. No one went hungry in the neighborhood if Joe had anything to do with it. There are stories about how someone tried to steal from the store once, which bemused everyone in the neighborhood, because why? Why would you try to steal from Joe when he would be happy to simply work something out with you? Food is an amazing thing. It's both a necessity for life and a source of joy and pleasure. It's an edible text which tells and carries forward our stories and our cultures. I think that is why the sharing of food is foundational to our humanity. To build a friendship is to eat together. To learn who we are is to share food with one another. Denise and Stephen are going to do a song now by Carole King. This is "We Are All in This Together."
The just are seeking justice. The meek are reaching out for something explain. We are all in this together, and maybe we'll see that someday when we conquer our fear together, when we finally find a way. And we all need forgiving for all this damage done, for the things we do not thinking, for the hurt that we cause someone. Oh, but me, I keep on living, caught somewhere there between. Oh, the reason and the meaning, the vision and the dream. Oh, we are all in this together. I know it seems easy to say, but I don't use the word forever. It's enough just to say someday. We are all in this together.
So, now it is summer in my childhood neighborhood of Manor Park. Matthew, Jordy, and Claire were sitting by the wading pool in the park across from the school the other day. Their feet were in the water, their sandals in their hands. By early August, summer has been well worn in, and the three kids, all three about to enter grade 8, had become expertly practiced at luxuriating in the languid heat of the day. They told each other jokes that they had heard on late-night TV, their delivery needing some work. And as they sat there, Jordy's phone binged with an email notification. The email came from Mrs. Foxford, which was odd because Mrs. Foxford doesn't use her email much. She's 85, and though Jordy and some of the other children make a practice of checking in on her, they usually call her or say hello when she's on her porch. The email read, "Sorry to bother you, but I need your help." Well, that was concerning, but Mrs. Foxford lives right across from the park, so the three walked the 10 or so yards to her house and rang the bell. Mrs. Foxford answered the door. "What do you need?" asked Jordy. "Not sure," said Mrs. Foxford. It soon became clear that Mrs. Foxford's email had been hacked. One of those scams that count on you replying, and before you know it, they're asking you to buy $100 of Amazon gift certificates for some non-existent nephew's birthday. The scammer did not count on the fact that Mrs. Foxford is the kind of person you call or drop in on rather than email. Well, Mrs. Foxford didn't need any help, but while the 3 kids were there, they said they might as well do some weeding in the garden. Mrs. Foxford went back inside where the phone was ringing off the hook. She answered it, and it was Bernie asking her what she needed. He had gotten the email as well. Mrs. Foxford explained what had happened. "Never mind," Bernie said. "I'll come over and replace those rotten fence boards you have." Mrs. Foxford set down the phone, and it was immediately ringing again. This time it was Walter Bridgenorth on the phone, wanting to know what he could do as well. Mrs. Foxford, throughout her life, has been one of those people always present in the life of Manor Park. She used to run bus tours for the neighborhood to Six Flags or Niagara Falls. Even now you might see her Buick making the rounds of the neighborhood, quietly leaving a box of food and supplies on the doorstep of someone she knows is in a bad spot, and slipping away before the door is answered. Though more often now she sends a discreet emissary on those errands, since her breathing gets short in the hot, humid weather. She has been an unassuming mentor to the children of the neighborhood and a confidant to the adults. This is all to explain that even as the more than 45 people who got the email realized it was a scammer, they still thought it would be a good idea to head over and see if she needed help. By Sunday afternoon, almost 40 people had paid a visit to Mrs. Foxford. Her basement had been drywalled, her bathroom repainted. She had 2 ham and cheese casseroles and 4 things of date squares. And what had started with Walter and Bernie replacing the few rotten fence boards had turned into building an entirely new fence. And that is how the weekend went. Sunday evening, a soccer game was being played in the park. From her window, Mrs. Foxford watched the game ebb and flow. Sometimes there was a lot of action, and other times people ended up talking more than playing. There were lots of people she knew over there. In fact, she knew about everyone. She would go over and visit them in a bit. But for now, it was fine, knowing they were there and she was here. Denise Pelley is going to sing a song now by Stevie Wonder. Here is Love's in Need of Love Today.
Good morning or evening, friends. Here's your friendly announcer. I have serious news to pass on to everybody. What I'm about to say could mean the world's disaster, could change your joy and laughter to tears and pain. It's that love's in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Hate's going round, breaking many hearts. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far. The force of evil plans possession. And if we let it destroy everybody, we all must take precautionary measures. If love and peace you treasure, then you'll hear me when I say that love's in need of a love today. Yes, it is. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Come on now, hate's going round and round, breaking many, many, many hearts. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far. Oh, love's in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Oh, haste, it's going round and round, it's breaking my heart. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far.
This final story is not one from Manor Park, but I think it's an important story about community, about looking out for one another. This is a true story that comes from St. Thomas Way. It's an old story that's been told by a lot of different people. The stories become known as Bushel for Bushel, and this version I'm going to read was handwritten by Peter MacArthur many years ago. This is the story of Neil McAlpine of Fingal, who saved this community when it was threatened by famine. McAlpine was an early farmer in the neighborhood of Fingal. He farmed somewhat extensively in those days, and when market prices did not suit him, he was in the position to hold his products until another season to sell. One year the frost killed all the wheat for some miles around, but Neil McAlpine had 3,000 bushels in his granaries. At first he exulted in the prospect of selling wheat profitably, but one day when he was in St. Thomas, he suddenly saw matters in a new light. Word was brought to him that the local miller wished to see him. When Neil McAlpine went to the miller said, "You have some wheat, haven't you?" "I have 3,000 bushels, McAlpine replied. The miller made him an offer which startled McAlpine. "Why," he exclaimed, "that is more money than you could get for it after it's been ground into flour. What are you going to do with the wheat?" "I'm going to sell it for seed grain to the other farmers," replied the miller. It dawned on Neil McAlpine that that would mean that his wheat would be sold for blood money, essentially, to his struggling neighbors who were threatened by the menace of famine. His mind was made up at once. He hurried home and developed his plan. The next day, being the Sabbath, he dressed and went to church early. Standing beside the gate, he whispered to each person he passed, "You can get seed grain at my place bushel for bushel. For each bushel you take at seed time, you will bring me back a bushel after harvest." He made this offer to every member of the Presbyterian Church, and when he went home after the service, he remembered that he had made his offer only to the Presbyterians, and there were many people belonging to other churches. So he put his sons on horseback and sent them to the other churches. A young man stood by the gate of each church and whispered to the worshipers as they entered, "You can get seed grain from my fathers, bushel for bushel. For each bushel you take now, you will bring back a bushel after the harvest." On Monday morning, the neighbors thronged to Neil's house. The boys were in the granary measuring out the wheat and filling the bags. And as each neighbor with his precious store of seed grain came past the house, Neil McAlpine would hold up his cane and ask, "How many bushels?" When they told him the amount, he would add, "Remember now, bushel for bushel. For every bushel you're taking now, you're to bring me back a bushel after harvest." For 3 days, the procession passed Neil McAlpine's door to the granary and back again, until all the grain was distributed, and every family in the area had seed wheat. This great-souled act accomplished the man's good purpose. And to this day, there are old people in the neighborhood of Fingal who will say as a way of reference, "It happened so many years before," or "It happened so many years after Neil McAlpine saved the neighborhood." Here is Denise Pelley and Stephen Holowitz.
What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb. There are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another meadow. There are cornfields and wheat fields enough to grow. There are sunbeams and moonbeams enough to shine. Oh, listen, Lord, if you want to know what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, oh, but just for everyone. What the world needs now is love, sweet love.
Thank you for joining us for To You with Love from Down the Street, part of Celebrating Our Communities, presented by the London Heritage Council. Thank you to Denise Pelley and Stephen Holowitz for the music. Our videographer is Donnie Ivy, with sound recording by Kevin DeMont. I'm Adam Corrigan Holowitz. See you soon, and take care until then.